All right, Libra. So a little bit concerning, but I think that, for me, looking at despondence coming out of Nightmare kind of makes sense. So this week from Lay Vampire Libra, you pulled Nightmare, Psychic Protection Shield, and Bad Dreams. And then from Chakra Wisdom, you pulled Despondence. Now, Nightmare to me immediately suggests that this is somebody who is coming out of a nightmare phase in their life. It's saying that you may have had some bad dreams, difficulty sleeping, dealing with nightmare situations. But, ultimately, this card is saying that there's protection coming your way now. But again, to me, this is somebody who has gone through a nightmare phase and now you're coming out of it. But you're coming out of it with a feeling of despondence, which is a little bit worrying. Now, the card at a glance says you have all the answers you need within. This card may indicate an emotional tie that no longer serves you. Remember, how you relate to the issue is the issue. Obstacles are removed when you change your relationship to them. And the very first quote for this card says, by taking action, I found the road out. The inspiration says that this card teaches us that the only route out of stagnation is motion. If we do nothing, we must accept the consequences. The personal question says, in which part of my life am I feeling immobilized? I know what I need to do. Am I willing to trust myself? The key ideas are feeling helpless, acceptance of circumstances, change on the horizon, and taking action. But I understand, I get it looking at it, If you've been through a difficult phase in your life, taking action toward, seeing better things isn't always going to happen immediately. It's just you don't want despondence to be something that is long-lasting, especially if you're coming out of extreme difficulties. All right, Libra, here we go. Here is the energy coming through. And that's good to see. When you're looking at the Four of Wands, despite what you're dealing with in terms of the Oracle cards, and again, general message is not going to apply to everybody. When you're looking at the Four of Wands as the overall energy here, there's going to be a reason to celebrate. That's one of the main things that I feel like with the Four of Wands. Now, depending on what's going on around it, it can be talking about delays. But you are talking about a stable foundation that's being built. The celebration that happens here, yeah, it can do with marriages and family reunions and things like that. But for me, it's looking at how far you've come and celebrating that, celebrating the accomplishments that you've made so far, right? Now, in the past, the King of Wands. So now for some of you, immediately for me, this feels like another person. And what's funny is that the King of Wands tends to show up a lot, when it comes to relationship issues. So for some Libras, you're looking at somebody who is, first of all, attractive, gives off some really good energy. But for me, the King of Wands, there's always been commitment issues, right? But for some of you, this beyond having to do with a romantic relationship, this could have to do with a family member. It could have to do with a boss, even somebody that you're working with. But I do feel like this is somebody else coming through. And you're waiting on them. What the hell? And that's where I felt like I needed to mention delays. Because even the Four of Wands in reverse, to me, you can't see it as a bad thing. It's just not happening just yet. And with the Hangman, it's just reinforcing that. Now for some of you, it's needing to see more of a situation, but then also I feel like you're being put in a state of limbo here when it comes to, what is the other person going to do? But what I worry about here is, again, despondence, right? Oh, now that worries me a little bit. Now, seeing the moon in future conditions. Are you dealing with a situation where somebody is creating confusion? The moon as future condition there's no real clarity there. The moon does not fully illuminate our path. I can't stress that enough when it comes to this card, right? That's why traditionally it has to do with fears and anxieties, illusions, chasing illusions, being deceived by your own desires. But what I feel more so is, the confusion over, well, what the hell? We've got this beautiful foundation here. Why are we not moving forward? What the hell is the holdup? And not understanding why. Now, your best path to follow, the Six of Swords, don't get caught up in that shit, right? Like, don't get caught up in conflict. When you're looking at the Six of Swords, it's saying you got to move away from that, you know? That, and there may be some issues that need to be dealt with. You know, we don't want to get into arguments. We don't want to get into any kind of fighting or battling it out, right? The Six of Swords is basically saying moving away, just, you know, needing to move away, right? Needing to move away from the conflict surrounding the situation, getting to a more calmer spot and having some clarity rather than dealing with confusion with the moon. In your environment. So Aries, possibly, for some of you. Now, when you're looking at the Emperor, you know, first of all, it is about order. Order and control out of chaos, needing to take a leadership position, getting your shit under control, right? But for some of you, if you're dealing with a person, this could be somebody who is really stubborn, really set in their ways. They have a way of doing things and that's it. It's almost like, it's funny because it has a Taurus type of feel. Like no matter how hard you prod them to get moving, it's not happening, you know, which is why the Hangman is there. You know, but at the same time here, there's confusion. Like, what the hell? You know, like I'm not understanding. We have, you know, the Four of Wands here. Why is it that there isn't any movement forward? You know, what is it that's causing the delay and not understanding that? But then at the same time, needing to be careful about getting caught up in things that you don't want to be involved in though either. You know, because again, the whole point is to move into a calmer situation, you know, but also needing to have some mental clarity. You know, and maybe this is something that just is not going to complete though either, you know, unfortunately. Like I kind of get that feeling though too, but it's only based on, you know, the stubborn set way of somebody else, you know, especially with this being in your environment, because, you know, I'm looking at these two and going, well, what the hell? Let's pick up the pace. But it's like, no, nope, not happening. And there's like confusion as to why. Now, your hopes and your fears, the Ten of Wands or the Ten of Staves. And that worries me a little bit. You know, if you're looking at it in terms of work, you know, there may be a lot of confusion surrounding why the holdup, you know, as far as working towards something here when you're looking at the Four of Wands. But then, you know, the fear is the uphill battle that you're going to have to go through. You know, which is funny because you can see it in this one too. In the back of the wands, you see, you know, the little castle thingy there on top of the hill, right? But being overwhelmed by the situation, you know, and not needing to carry any more burdens. And then the outcome, the Magician. You know, what worries me here is the moon. You know, how the hell are you manifesting anything if there isn't any clarity? You know, what is the conflict that you need to move away from here? Does it have to do with the fact that you're still waiting on somebody to get things going here? You know, again, you have the Four of Wands front and center, but, you know, what's the holdup? Like, that is what I continuously feel looking at this is like, what the hell? What is the holdup here? All right. Now, let's just look at this in terms of energy surrounding you first, and then we'll get into the other thing that's going on here. First of all, still, regardless of the Magician being there and your ability to have confidence in yourself, there is still confusion over what you are working toward and what you are building here because there are delays that are happening, right? When you're looking at the Queen of Swords, which I love for Libra, by the way, it is you cutting through the bullshit, getting straight to the point. Let's get on with this. Now, on the other hand, for some of you, you may be turning a cold shoulder to somebody and looking at manifesting something else here. You know, when you're looking at a foundation that you're wanting to build on, if somebody isn't game for it, I think you're moving on to a different situation here because now, again, let's go back to just the energy, okay? The Queen of Swords, cutting through the bullshit, getting straight to the point, being a little bit cold, and probably being a little bit turned off. You know, it's possible that we're talking about the same person here. But I don't know. I feel like this is somebody else here. And the reason why I say that is because what comes out of this. Now, in terms of the energy that's surrounding you, the King of Pentacles, you're talking about being reliable, needing somebody who is reliable. right? Beyond needing success or, having the ability to create success, right? Now, where I start to question here is this Ace of Cups, right? What's happening here? Is this somebody else that's coming through here? Because I feel like, because I'm looking at the backs turned between the Queen of Swords and then the King of Wands, but then, here you go with, this dependable, reliable person who may be offering you a beginning that is a little bit more fulfilling, Maybe you're done dealing with somebody else. Maybe you're trying to move on with a different situation here, Tired of being overwhelmed by, the limbo phase and not really having a lot of clarity, and I don't think that, if you're dealing with another person looking at the King of Pentacles and there's the Ace of Cups involved in this situation, I don't think that, this is fantasy or unrealistic or illusions or anything like that. What I feel like is confusion, especially if you're dealing with possibly two different people, and no matter what the relationship is. Ultimately, what I feel like with the Magician coming out is that you're deciding to manifest what the hell you want to see, rather than being stuck in this like waiting phase, because I still feel like not pressure on you, but pressure that you're giving as far as let's go, let's start moving. If you're not going to do that, then I'm moving the hell on. I've got other things that I need to do, because the confusion isn't something that I think is stopping you. There may be some confusion as far as, well, what the hell? Like, I don't get it, But I don't feel like you're needing an outcome out of the situation. You're not staying stuck in it. What's funny is that you're moving. Like, you're moving now. And for a lot of you, the possibility here is, having to do with somebody else, But I'm seeing practical. I'm seeing realistic. I'm not seeing illusionary, I think that out of confusion is where, the Magician starts to play in. I don't feel like anybody's manipulating anything as far as where the outcome goes, because otherwise the Queen of Swords would not be there. I guarantee you she would not be there. I mean, you're cutting right through it. You're getting straight to the point here, but I feel more so that it's you manifesting something else. Completely something else. All right, Libra, we're going to take a look at the soul trees to see what other messages there are. Oh, solar plexus. Honor yourself. Damn straight. And birth. Wow. All right. Now, when you're looking at birth, especially with this deck, this is a specific card. It is talking about an actual birth. But beyond that, it is the birth of a new life. The birth of a new path, right? We always see that when it comes to, like, birth cards or child cards, right? Like, even with the Empress giving birth to new ideas, right? But literally, like, for some of you, it's going to have to do with a birth. So in that case, right, congratulations, absolutely. But when you're looking at, the solar plexus here, right, this is your identity. This is your sense of self and who you feel like you are. But the only way that you're going to get that chakra going is by honoring yourself. But, again, I still get that feeling that, like, I'm not dealing with this, right? It's like you are doing what you need to, and it's creating, the birth of something new, basically, right? But it's good to have that sense of self, that identity. What is it that's driving you, right? But again, it's so important to honor yourself, If somebody else is not willing to cooperate, well, then that's just tough shit, right? All right, Libra, we're going to take a look at the romance angels here to see what messages there are for you guys in terms of relationships. And express your love. Go ahead and make the romantic gesture, especially for those of you who are meeting somebody new. So when we're looking at attraction, in terms of, wanting to attract love into your life, right? What makes us attractive to other people is your ability to actually enjoy life and enjoy the moments, right? When you give off that kind of energy, that's what people are attracted to, because, sometimes we have a habit of being like, Debbie Downers, so to speak, right? So when we see somebody who is really enjoying life, it's like, oh, let me just suck on your energy here for a little bit, right? So basically, it's saying that in order to attract, what you're wanting, right? Like you need to enjoy the moments. Now on the other hand, it's literally about attraction that's happening and a need for you to express some romantic feelings though too. You know, for those of you who are in happy relationships, this could just be a work situation. You may have somebody coming through that may be offering you something better, but as far as relationships go, it looks great. There's attraction there. Enjoy the moments that you have, right? And express the way that you feel. But I don't know, Libra, again, it's general messages. It's not going to apply to everybody, but I feel like somebody else is coming in with a better offer. Looking at that King of Pentacles and the Ace of Cups, especially if you're dealing with someone that is stubborn and like set in their ways and, they're not moving, But again, you don't want to become, complacent or despondent, right? Like the two of them for me are like hand in hand because basically you're accepting your circumstances when you need to do something else. But I feel like that's what you end up doing anyway.